Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Today, we're diving into a topic that so many English learners struggle with pronunciation.
Yes, English pronunciation can be tricky, but don't worry, we've got some hacks that will make it easier and more natural for you.
Exactly. A lot of learners think they need to sound perfect to be understood, but that's not true. The goal isn't perfection, it's clarity.
That's a great point. And pronunciation isn't just about how you say individual word, it's also about rhythm, stress, and intonation.
Right. And that's actually our first hack, focus on the rhythm of English, not just the sounds.
Yes, English has a natural flow, with stressed and unstressed syllables. If you get the rhythm right, even if your pronunciation isn't perfect, you'll sound much more natural.
Exactly. A good way to practice this is by listening to native speakers and trying to copy their rhythm. Don't just focus on words, focus on how they say them.
Yes, shadowing is a great technique for this. Just play a short clip of a native speaker, pause, and repeat exactly how they say it, trying to match their tone and stress.
That's such a good tip. Another hack that helps a lot is learning common sound patterns.
Oh, definitely. English has a lot of tricky sound changes. For example, the letter T doesn't always sound like a clear T.
Right. Like in words such as water or butter, the T sounds more like a soft E in American English, so it sounds like waiter or butter.
Exactly. And another example is how native speakers connect words. Instead of saying what do you want, slowly, it sounds more like what do you want.
Yes, that's called connected speech, and it's super important if you want to sound more natural.
A great way to practice this is by listening to conversations, not just individual words. Songs, movies, and interviews are perfect for this.
That's a great point. And speaking of songs, our next hack is using music to improve pronunciation.
Yes, singing along to songs helps you practice pronunciation naturally, without even thinking about it.
Right. Plus, it helps you get used to common sound reductions, like gonna instead of going to, or wanna instead of want to.
And the best part, it's fun. You're practicing pronunciation without feeling like you're studying.
Exactly. And that's what makes pronunciation easier, practicing in a way that feels natural and enjoyable.
Yes, another pronunciation hack is breaking words into smaller parts to make them easier to say.
That's a good one. Some words look difficult, but when you break them down, they're much easier to pronounce.
For example, comfortable might seem hard, but if you break it into comfortable instead of trying to say each letter, it's easier.
Yes, and February sounds more like February instead of how it's written.
Exactly. English spelling can be misleading. So sometimes, saying words the way native speakers actually pronounce them rather than how they look makes a huge difference.
That's a great point. And one last hack, record yourself speaking.
Oh, this is so important. A lot of learners don't realize what they actually sound like until they hear themselves.
Right. When you record yourself and listen back, you can hear which sounds you need to improve.
Yes, and even better, compare your recording to a native speaker's pronunciation and see what's different.
That's a really effective way to fine-tune your pronunciation.
Definitely. Alright, we've shared some really useful pronunciation hacks today, but we're just getting started.
Yeah, pronunciation is one of those things that takes time. But if you practice the right way, you'll see huge improvements.
Exactly, and one thing that helps is focusing on mouth position and tongue placement. A lot of English sounds don't exist in other languages, so if your mouth isn't in the right position, the sound won't come out right.
That's so true. Like the difference between TH and S sounds. A lot of learners pronounce think as sink because they don't put their tongue between their teeth.
Yes, a simple fix is to look in the mirror while saying words with TH sounds, like this or thank you. If you can see your tongue between your teeth, you're doing it right.
Another tricky one is the difference between L and OEP. Some languages don't have both sounds, so they can be hard to separate.
Right, a good trick is exaggerating the sounds when practicing. Say light and write really slowly, focusing on how your tongue moves. For L, the tongue touches the roof of your mouth. For R, it doesn't.
Exactly. It feels weird at first, but once you get used to it, it becomes natural.
And that's the key. Pronunciation is about muscle memory. You have to train your mouth to move in a new way, just like when you learn a new sport or musical instrument.
That's a great comparison. It's not just about listening and repeating, it's about physically training your mouth to make new sounds.
Yes, and one of the best ways to do that is tongue twisters.
Oh, that's a fun one. Tongue twisters force you to focus on small pronunciation details.
Exactly, like she sells seashells by the seashore. If you can say that fast, your S and SH pronunciation will improve.
Or red lorry. Yellow lorry. That's great for practicing L and R sounds.
Yes, and the trick is to start slow, then gradually speed up as you get better.
Another pronunciation hack is mimicking native speakers as closely as possible.
Yes, a lot of people practice by reading English out loud, which is good, but it's even better to copy real speech.
Right, because the way we speak is often different from how words are written.
Exactly. If you want to sound more natural, listen to podcasts, interviews, or even movie scenes and copy how the speakers talk.
Yes, and don't just copy the words, copy the tone, speed, and rhythm too.
That's such an important point. English isn't just about individual words, it's about how you say them.
And a lot of meaning comes from intonation. Like, if you say, really? With a rising tone, it sounds like a question. But if you say it with a flat tone, it sounds like you don't believe the person.
Yes, that's why sometimes, even if your pronunciation is correct, people might misunderstand you if the intonation is off.
Exactly. So a good trick is to repeat full phrases, not just words, and pay attention to how native speakers say them.
Yes, and that brings me to another important point. Don't stress about your accent too much.
That's a big one. A lot of learners think they have to completely erase their accent to be good at English, but that's not true.
Exactly. Having an accent is totally fine as long as people understand you. The goal isn't to sound exactly like a native speaker, it's to communicate clearly.
Yes, and honestly, accents are interesting. They show where you're from and give you personality.
Right, there's no single correct way to sound. Even native English speakers have different accents depending on where they're from.
Exactly. So instead of trying to get rid of your accent, focus on clarity, making sure your words are easy to understand.
Yes, and a great way to test that is to record yourself and ask, would someone understand this easily?
That's such a good tip. If people understand you without effort, your pronunciation is good enough.
Exactly, so don't stress about sounding perfect, just focus on being clear and natural.
And have fun with it. Pronunciation should be something you enjoy improving, not something that makes you anxious.
Yes, the more you practice in a relaxed way, the better your pronunciation will become over time.
And another great way to improve pronunciation is by using minimal pairs words that sound almost the same but have one small difference.
Oh, that's a really good technique, like ship and sheep or bid and beat.
Exactly. The vowel sounds are slightly different, but if you can train your ear to hear the difference, it helps with speaking too.
Right. A simple way to practice is by listening to minimal pairs and repeating them until you can clearly hear and say the difference.
And you can even make it fun by testing yourself. Record both words, then play them back randomly and see if you can hear which one is which.
That's a great idea. And speaking of hearing, another pronunciation hack is to train your listening skills. A lot of people think pronunciation is only about speaking, but it starts with listening.
Yes, because if you can't hear a sound clearly, you won't be able to pronounce it correctly.
Exactly. That's why listening to different accents and natural speech is so important. The more you expose yourself to real English, the better your pronunciation will get.
That's why I always recommend learners to listen to podcasts, audiobooks, or even real conversations instead of just textbook audio.
Yes, and even watching interviews is great because you can see the speaker's mouth movements and hear how they naturally connect words.
And if you want to take it a step further, try slowing down audio when practicing. A lot of apps and websites let you change the speed, so you can focus on the small pronunciation details.
That's such a helpful trick. And once you get comfortable, you can speed it up again to match natural speech.
Exactly. It's all about training your ear and mouth together.
And honestly, that's how native speakers learn too. When kids grow up, they don't start by reading words, they start by hearing and copying the sounds.
That's a great point. So instead of only focusing on spelling, try to learn words the way a child would by listening and repeating.
Yes, because sometimes spelling in English doesn't match pronunciation at all. Like, why does though, through, and tough all sound different?
English spelling is so weird sometimes. That's why it's better to learn pronunciation by listening rather than just reading.
Exactly. And one last thing, don't be afraid to exaggerate sounds when practicing.
Oh, that's a good one. If you exaggerate at first, it makes it easier to say the word naturally later.
Right, like if you struggle with the sounds, try making an extra stronger at first. Once you get used to it, you can tone it down to sound more natural.
Same with intonation. If your speech sounds flat, try practicing with really exaggerated ups and downs. It might feel silly, but it helps you sound more natural in conversations.
Exactly, because English has a natural rhythm, and exaggerating it at first helps you get used to it.
And before you know it, it won't feel exaggerated at all, it'll just feel natural.
That's the goal. The more you practice in a fun, relaxed way, the faster your pronunciation will improve.
And another thing that really helps with pronunciation is understanding syllable stress. A lot of learners struggle not because they say the wrong sounds, but because they put the stress on the wrong part of the word.
That's so true. English words have a natural stress pattern, and if you stress the wrong syllable, it can make a word sound completely different.
Like desert and dessert, one is a dry place, and the other is something sweet. But the only difference is where the stress is placed.
Exactly, or present as a noun versus present as a verb. The first one has stress on the first syllable, and the second one has stress on the second syllable.
Right. So a good way to practice is by looking up words in a dictionary and paying attention to the little apostrophe mark. That shows which syllable is stressed.
And you can also listen to native speakers and repeat how they naturally stress words. Some learners try to pronounce every syllable equally, but that's not how English works.
Yeah, and it's not just about word sentence stress is important too. Some words in a sentence are stronger, and others are weaker.
That's why native speakers sometimes sound like they're skipping words. They're not actually skipping them, they're just reducing the unstressed words.
Exactly. Like, instead of saying every word clearly in I want to go, native speakers usually say, I want to go.
Yes, and that's why sometimes learners struggle to understand spoken English. They expect every word to be pronounced fully, but native speakers naturally reduce sounds.
That's why listening to real conversations is so important. If you only listen to slow, clear speech from language lessons, you won't get used to the natural rhythm of English.
And one thing that helps is practicing with thought groups. Instead of saying one word at a time, try grouping words together like native speakers do.
That's a great tip. Like instead of saying, what are you doing? Word by word, group it as what you're doing. It sounds more natural that way.
Right, and even if you don't say it exactly like a native speaker, just thinking in groups of words instead of single words will make your pronunciation smoother.
And it also helps with fluency. If you focus too much on each individual word, your speech will sound choppy. But if you practice saying phrases as a whole, it will sound more natural.
That's a huge difference. Native speakers don't think about every word separately, they think in full phrases.
Yeah, and that's why even improving pronunciation isn't just about sounds, it's about rhythm, stress, and fluency all working together.
Exactly. If you want to sound more natural, it's not just about saying words correctly, but about making your speech flow like a native speaker's.
And the best way to do that is practice, practice, practice. The more you expose yourself to real spoken English, the easier it gets.
And don't be afraid to experiment. Try different techniques. Record yourself. Mimic native speakers. Find what works best for you.
Yeah, pronunciation isn't something you master overnight. It's something you improve little by little.
But the good news is, even small changes can make a big difference in how natural you sound.
Exactly. And the key takeaway here is that pronunciation isn't just about individual sounds, it's about rhythm, stress, and fluency all coming together.
Right, and it's not about being perfect or losing your accent. It's about being clear and confident so people can understand you easily.
Exactly. So don't stress too much about sounding exactly like a native speaker. Just focus on small, consistent improvements, and you'll see progress over time.
And most importantly, have fun with it. Try different techniques. Record yourself. Shadow native speakers, whatever helps you stay motivated.
Yes. And remember, pronunciation is a skill. And like any skill, the more you practice, the better you get.
Alright, that's a wrap for today's episode. We hope these pronunciation hacks help you feel more confident when speaking English. See you soon, keep improving, and don't forget to have fun with English.
Bye.
Bye.